This is the video explaining how to add real numbers for the sign numbers unit. Sign numbers unit or lesson number 3. So first you have to know what real numbers are. So real numbers are all the numbers you've ever heard of that include fractions, decimals, integers, etc. Let me get rid of my face. Forgot to do that. Okay. It's important that you understand what the opposite of something is, or what additive inverse, which means the same thing as the opposite, because we're going to talk about a property called the inverse property. So the additive inverse, or the opposite of something, is just a number with a different sign. So for example, 4 and -4 are additive inverses or opposites because they have different signs. This one has that hidden positive sign, that invisible, it's not really hidden, it's just invisible positive sign, and then -4. Okay, moving on to the next thing. So there are two properties of addition. Basically, the first one is that anytime you add a number with to 0, or you add 0 to a number, you get the exact same number. It's called the identity property because the answer is identical to the number that you are adding to 0. So 0 is a magic number in addition because when you add it to anything, you end up with the exact same number. The inverse property of addition involves the additive inverses. That's why it's called inverse. And basically the inverse property says that anytime you add a number to its opposite or to its additive inverse, you're undoing it and therefore you get 0. So those are the two properties of addition that are helpful because then you don't have to actually think about how to add those numbers. You just know automatically. Okay, so there are two rules for adding real numbers. The first rule says if the signs are the same, you add their absolute values and you keep the same sign. So, to add -56 and -56, we're going to take their absolute values. And the absolute value of 56 is 56. So, 56 plus 56 is 112. And then the sign that we're going to use is the same as the one that was in the original number, which was in both of the original numbers because they're the same sign. So they're both negative numbers. So therefore we ended up with -112. Okay, so that's rule number 1. When the signs are the same, you add and keep the sign. That's the short version. Now, if the signs are different, you find the difference. And remember back from the first section in this, when you find the difference, that means you're subtracting. You're going to find the difference of the absolute values and use the sign of the addend with the higher absolute value. That's kind of complicated. So let's start this, okay? So we have -56 plus 22, and I know that the answer is already there, but we're still going to use that example. So it says, find the difference of the absolute value. So if we're going to take the absolute value of this, we're going to take the absolute value of this. So we're thinking in our heads, 56. Uh-oh, I'm really low. I'm going to do it up here. So we're going to think 56 minus 20. Oops, I forgot the 6. 56 minus 22. This is what we're thinking now, equals 34. So you notice in both of my problems, because I took the absolute value of both of the numbers, the basic part of my answer is 34. That one's 34. That one's 34. The difference is that in this first number, the addend with the higher absolute value was -56. So this number has the higher absolute value because 56 is definitely bigger than 22. So in the first problem, -56, I ended up with -54. And then in the second problem, 56 still has the higher absolute value. And so my answer here Even though it's invisible, that invisible plus sign is positive 34. So now let's do a couple that don't have answers with them. Okay, so I actually didn't put any examples on here because I thought it would be easier just to make them up rather than type them, because I always end up copying them anyway. So let's do negative 17 plus 35. Okay. So the first question you have to ask yourself, are the signs the same or are they different? I'm going to use an S or D. So are they the same or are they different? Well, they're definitely different. So this time we have to use the rule that says find the difference and use the sign of the number with the higher absolute value. So I'm going to take the absolute values of both of these numbers. Basically, I'm just using those two numbers. So I'm thinking in my head 35, because that's bigger, minus 17. I'm going to find the difference of their absolute values. I'm going to subtract them. 35 minus 17 is 18. Okay? And then I have to decide, should I make it negative 18 or should I make it positive 18? So this one was bigger. So in the problem, this number was positive, and so therefore the answer is positive 18. Okay, let's get rid of that. I want to keep my question there, because we're going to use that question over and over again. I'm going to put the question mark at the end this time. Okay. Okay, so let's go with another example. How about 47 plus negative 88. Okay, so 47 plus negative 88. Again, the signs are different, so we're going to take the absolute values of those numbers, which is going to give us 47 and 88. So then we're going to subtract 88 minus 47. If you can't do it mentally, you should do it vertically, but I picked numbers that I could do mentally. So that gives me 41. And now I have to decide which one of those two numbers had the higher absolute value. 88 has the higher absolute value. It's negative. Therefore, my answer is negative. Okay, one last example in integers. Then we'll do one fraction and one, oops, thought I clicked on the eraser. Oh, still not erasing. Okay, we'll just get rid of the whole thing. Okay, so let's do another example. Let's do negative 12 plus negative 19. Okay, so again, we ask ourselves the question, are they the same or are they different? They're the same. So when the signs are the same, you add their absolute values. So the absolute value of negative 12 is 12. The absolute value of negative 19 is 19. I'm going to add their absolute values. Again, I picked numbers that I can add mentally, so that equals 31. And now I have to decide on the sign. So the rule is you add and keep the sign. So if both of the signs are negatives, I'm going to keep that negative sign, and so my answer is negative 31. Just like if you would add two positive numbers, which you've been doing since you were 5 years old, you would get a positive number. So if the signs are the same, you add and keep the sign. Okay, let's do a decimal example. So let's say we have negative 39.6 plus 7.42. Okay, so ask ourselves that same question. Are the same signs the same or are they different? The signs are definitely different. So that means we have to find the difference of their absolute value. So if I take the absolute value of 39.6, I get 39.6. If I find the absolute value of 7.42, I get 7.42. It's smaller, so I'm going to put it on the bottom. I have to remember to line up the decimal points and to line up all the subsequent place values. So now in order to subtract this, I'm going to need to add a 0 in the numerator. In the top number. Then I'm going to have to borrow. That makes this 10. 10 minus 2 is 8. 5 minus 4 is 1. 9 minus 7 is 2. And 3 minus is nothing, or 0 is 3. Then I have to decide what my sign should be. So the signs were different. So I found the difference, and I take the sign of the number with the higher absolute value. The higher absolute value number goes on top. Therefore, I'm going to use this negative sign, and therefore my answer is negative. Okay? Finally, I'm going to do one with rational numbers, which means the same thing as fractions. So let's say that I'm going to add negative 4 3/4 plus negative 9 1/4. So I picked this on purpose so I didn't have to find a common denominator, but remember you have to find a common denominator if they don't already match. So in order to add these, first question I ask myself is, are the signs the same or are they different? They're both negative, so therefore they're both the same. So that means I'm going to add and keep the sign. So they're both the same. So I'm going to add their absolute value. So that means I'm going to add 4 3/4 plus 9 1/4. Okay, so 3/4 plus 1/4. Remember, I add the fractions. That's 4/4. And 4 plus 9 is 13. 4/4 is an improper fraction because the numerator isn't smaller than the denominator. So I'm going to change that to 13 plus 1, which is 14. Okay, and then I have to decide what sign the answer is. So I'm going to look at the signs. Remember, the signs are the same. So I add and keep the sign. The signs are both negative. And so therefore, because both of these signs are negative, I'm going to keep the sign. So my answer is going to be negative 14. Okay, just remember that if you have two negative numbers, like let's just do a really quick one. Negative 6 1/9 plus 7/9. Try and squeeze this in at the end of the video. I take the absolute value, so I get 6 1/9. Oh wait, I forgot. Do I ask myself this question? Signs are the same or are they different? They are different, so I'm going to find the difference. I'm going to subtract. So I'm going to subtract 6 1/9 minus 7/9. I have common denominators already, so that means I have to subtract the fractions. The fractions, I can't do 1 minus 7, so I have to borrow 1 from the 6. So now we're using our subtracting mixed numbers rule. I add the numerator and the denominator together to get my new numerator of a 10. So I do 10 minus 7 is 3. I'm going to write it over here because I'm running out of room. And put my 5. I can put that in lower terms. So I'm going to get 5 1/3. And then the number that had the greater absolute value was 6 1/9. It's negative. And so therefore I'm going to make my answer negative. 5 1/3. That's adding real numbers. Good luck.